Well, welcome. When we talk about finances at the center of the universe here in Milford, I always get asked from most people 3 questions. 1, are we raising to the 2.5% limit we're allowed to? The answer has been no for many years. Did we fund all the critical articles? Yes, at least in the opinion of most of us, we fund all the critical articles. There may be one that we don't that is critical to somebody. And 3, do we have a surplus again this year? And luckily the answer has been yes. And at that point, most people look and say, thank you, and they're happy and they go away. What the 4th question ought to be is, how does it happen? I've always publicly talked about the magic in Milford is the department heads and how much they love our little town and what they do. But tonight I want to look at 3 key people that somehow sew all the various interests together and come up with $100 million. I mean, that's amazing to me that our budget is $100 million. When I grew up, $100 million, you would buy Milford, they'd throw in Hopedale, and for $100 million, you'd probably get Mendon too. So tonight, we want you to meet 3 key people who make the financial system work in our town. So why don't we start with introductions?
Thank you. Well, my name's Zach Taylor. I'm the finance director for Milford. I'm in my 7th year now, can't believe it. Having so much fun, it's been flying. Started my career off in the CPA world, preparing taxes, doing audits, and that got old real fast, doing 60, 70 hours a week. Did a lot of work in Warwick, did a lot of auditing of $100 million companies, which is why I think I was desirable on paper when I came here to Milford, but I also did some internships, stuff like that, and in Rhode Island in municipal government, and really enjoyed the work. So figured when I saw the ad, I would jump on it, and here I am 7 years later. So I started off here as the assistant town accountant, which Wendell was about a year ago, and he promoted up to town accountant. At that point, I was the town accountant, and we did not have a finance director. We had an elected treasurer, which now we have Chris Pillar, our appointed treasurer. So at that transition, we had a lot of discussions and thought it'd be wise to make these positions appointed and to put me at the top of the pyramid. That way I can oversee everything and make sure that those questions you started the session off with remain desirable answers. And hasn't been an easy task, but it's an enjoyable task, and I think we do a really good job. We have a great team approach. I like everyone that works in our departments, and it's been pleasurable.
The new guy.
Okay. I'm Wendell Phillips, and I'm the town accountant. I've been in the position for a little over 5 years. I started as the assistant town accountant. I went to Babson College, and out of college, I worked for Fidelity for a while in investments field, and I saw the opportunity to be hired. They had a job opening for assistant town accountant in Milford, my hometown. I thought it would be a good fit, and it'd be something that I had a passion about, being born and brought up in the area. I applied for it and was fortunate enough to get the job. And then as the finance department transitioned and Zach got his promotion, and I ended up being promoted to the town accountant position, and just slowly but surely, as I started the assistant, more and more responsibilities and the job description kind of expanded, and I think it was just kind of a logical transition moving into that town accountant position. I really enjoy my work, and I feel we have a great team here, a finance team. A lot of the departments in Milford it's a great place to work, and I'm fortunate to be there.
So I'm Chris Pillar. I'm recently hired treasurer, going on my 2nd year. Along with Zach and Wendell, I did start in the private sector out of school. I went to Northeastern, and I started actually at Consigli Construction in their accounting department, and then went on to be a controller for a $100 million construction company and manufacturing company. Before I was looking for a change and decided to apply for the treasurer's role. Happy I did it. Love the people I work with. Get along with Wendell and Zach great. We have a strong bond that we can bounce accounting questions, treasury questions off each other, and without a hesitation, get the help we need. So.
Well, it's nice that I can joke and say on the right side of the building, the new guy's 5 years in his job. That's a nice statement, because so many municipal departments outside of Milford, you see them every year or two, and they're perpetually in a training and a learning mode.
Yep.
Now, when we look at the finance department, what do we need one for? What does it do? Because people don't understand. I mean, we were joking, saying, okay, Chris, he's the squirrel that puts the nuts away for the long term. Wendell counts the beans. I mean, in simplified terms, you can understand that. But then you sit there and say, okay, so why do we need a whole department to oversee a little tiny town?
So think about it this way. So the town of Milford, when we talk your $100 million budget, we're primarily talking around 85% salaries and wages. So municipalities provide services to the citizens, and services is really done through employees performing their duties. You have a school that, as you are well aware, is about a little more than 50% of our overall budget. We have the next largest is health insurance, but that's pretty much personal services too. So we're talking around 85, 86, 87 million dollars of employees, benefits, retirement, and we do complete in-house payroll for that. Complete soup to nuts in-house payroll. That's one of our large primary functions in the finance department for the entire town, district, and
if I can interrupt, you hit it with the profound statement that it's a $100 million company. I joke and say, tiny little town of Milford.
Yeah.
Well, it's no longer the tiny little town.
No, that's nothing to sneeze
You got
at.
hundreds of people with hundreds of families,
Yes.
all under the umbrella of the town of Milford.
Correct. So on top of just doing complete in-house payroll, which is no easy task, let me tell you, he right now is till next week basically to get W-2s out. So 12/31 just came, and now new IRS regulation says he has till the end of the month to get it out, but we want to jump ahead, and he's going to have it out by the end of next week. That's difficult.
I laugh because it was 3 or 4 years ago when your predecessor got a phone call. The dog ate my W-2. And I had to laugh because it was my dog. He ate my daughter's W-2, just chewing on everything. And you sit there and say, somewhere in your list of priorities, canine attack of W-2 form is probably not a responsibility.
It's not typically on the job
description. But there it was. You had an employee who needed a new W-2 because the IRS doesn't look fondly upon half-chewed documents.
Oh, it's funny you say that because there are so many minor issues like that throughout, I don't even want to say like every day more or less, not even throughout the year. Like we encounter stuff that is my 7th year again, and we every so often there's items that I'm like, what? Like, say
can't
that
make
again?
this stuff up.
Seriously. But we processed last year, 1,600 W-2s?
Yeah, and we're on track. We're going to be just shy of 1,700 this year. So
that doesn't translate to full-time employees, but you have your laborers, you have decent turnover in the school system with TAs becoming
How
teachers.
many employees does the town have?
Full-time, 913.
So you're starting off with almost 1,000 when you figure the turnover, and then you layer in a few part-timers here and there. And
now, I'll break that down. 913 full-time employees, 11 collective bargaining units, of which not many of them are unique at all. They all have different rules that they have to play by and that we collectively have to administer, from benefits to pay scales to supplemental pays to the way workers' comp is handled, all different. So one of the most difficult tasks, in my opinion, that we have to do is to look at these individual cases and dissect it and come up with the proper solution. And a lot of times, they hear me preach all the time, consistency. We must be consistent. Problem is, a lot of times, it's might on the outside seem like a similar situation, but there's different rules that apply to them, and we have to analyze that. Wendell's like my contract guy, so how often are you in those contracts?
Oh, we're on a
Pull
regular
out the Mace
basis, we're looking
contract,
at
let's look
those,
at it
yeah.
again, you know? So that's probably the difficulties of our
And
day-to-day
that's
type
probably the
functions.
hardest thing is when it comes down to preparing the budget. How many times have we looked and said, what's fair?
Yeah,
You know, does it have to be exactly the same? No, it can't be. I mean, at running a company, you may give somebody like a Wendell, younger, more salary, and somebody old, more stock,
yep.
you know, that type thing,
They
because,
have different needs.
well,
yeah.
he's got a kid going to college, whatever, he needs cash now.
Yeah,
Whereas, okay, I'm through college, really what I want is stock options. So if you could look and say, well, his salary isn't exactly the same, or if you just looked at the stock awards, you could say, wait a minute, why did Chris get more? Well, he took a lower salary. But that's in a private company. I don't know how you can do that with all the union
yeah.
rules.
And keep in mind, everything we do is public record. So in those private companies you're talking about, you don't know what he has,
Right.
and and he doesn't know what you have unless you tell him. And typically, that's the no-no of the private industry.
Well, but I mean, you get a kick out of town meeting. They get the books, the first thing you see is people going to the back of the book.
Yep.
What did my neighbor make?
Yeah,
Right.
You know, how much did they pay my friend or my friend's cousin? And
yep, that happens. We prepare that.
Yeah, so going back to Zach's point about in-house payroll, there's not probably a day throughout the week that my office and Wendell's office are communicating back and forth, whether he's checking the payrolls that were sent in from the other departments or we're questioning something that they put on and that he hasn't got to yet. So we're always communicating. And if we didn't have the unique bonds that we do or the closeness that we all have, it wouldn't get done. I mean, it's a very short time frame to get 1,600 individuals, give or take, payrolls in within
well,
3 or 4 days.
with all due respect, in 2 weeks, my mortgage is due. Don't want to hear that Wendell couldn't make it in, or that Chris was busy doing some strategic bond. No, my mortgage
Yep.
payment is due. I expect a paycheck.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and the other important note with payroll, every week, or it seems like it changes because we have all these step increases for individuals, different contracts have raises at different times of the year. You know, there's so many different fluctuations in payroll that every week I send an email
Yep.
to the treasurer's office of what our upcoming changes are, and there's so many different stipends like fire, police, school credits that these people can take, and I think change is basically the rule of payroll. Nothing's
Pretty
ever
much.
constant,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah.
Well, we've gone through it over and over this time of year when you start talking about preparing a budget.
Correct.
And, I mean, I always get yelled at for calling it chutes and ladders because it feels like the game. Well, we need a 5% increase because of our chutes and ladders. Well, I need to be young, thin, and have hair. Doesn't mean I'm going
Yeah.
to be. You know, we still have to meet a balanced budget.
Correct.
And it's hard.
It is.
And too many times we've had the discussion that says the contracts that are negotiated only deal with the survivors. You know, you want to give somebody a 10% raise? That's your prerogative as the head of the department. There'll be a lot less people in that canoe because you still we got to live within our 2.5, you know, sometimes we get 3.5% growth. We're not, I don't know of many years I've seen 5 and 10% increases in revenue.
No, it typically doesn't happen. So last year, if you recall, the state had given us a 5%, which that blew my mind. And until it was the extreme final version that was submitted out to everyone, I didn't believe it.
No.
We still went with a 2.5, even though right in front of us it said 5. I'm like, they're gonna come out and be breaking out the red pen and dicing it away, but they did. And Baker said he was going to. They did, but we will see what happens this year. I am not going to be budgeting based on a 5% again, but
Oh, God,
I
no.
seriously doubt they're going to be
I
able to
mean,
match
we already
that.
just saw $50,000 taken back.
Yeah, more than that. They've got
No, it's just a bus.
oh yeah,
One little line item.
Yep. Pino Field,
Pino Field, another
Youth
outline.
Center.
You start going through all of those, and you say, it's the middle of the year. And the killer is when you take away 50 grand in January, it's like 100 grand.
Yeah.
Because you got to make up for that 50 in the next 6
Yeah,
months.
you were counting on that, and now it's gone. Yep.
Right.
You know, so
Yep. Every earmark that we were supposed to be getting, as of right now, is off the table.
and you can't blame Governor Baker.
No, you can't.
He said he was going to run a balanced budget and a fiscally responsible
Yeah.
administration. Dang him for doing what we elected him to do.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? So,
So I'm pleased on that end right now. The state's been doing pretty good. You hear every year that they're not meeting the revenue marks, but they find a way to pull it off. Their stabilization is really excellent, so not tremendously concerned on that angle. But I also think where you see a lot of other communities really on their knees begging for some more money from the state, where we're kind of on the other end and we're going to work with what we get, bottom line. And it becomes very important in the budget building process, which we're about to walk into. 1/1 came, we're here, we're ready to go. And I think that's where over the past few years you've been hearing me speak repetitively about a goals and objective-based budget. So we collectively come together, selectmen and FinCom, and we up front, before we do anything, basically set out what we want to do, and then we work to make sure we get there. And since I've been here, I don't think there's been a year that we haven't met what we've been trying to do.
no, I mean, it always starts. I mean, I love it when the FinCom, we're broke, we have no money. And the departments, if we don't get a 90% raise, the sun won't shine, the moon won't rise, you know. Okay, we've gone through that, yes. Now let's talk seriously.
Yep.
What do we have to do? And it always seems to work.
Yeah.
But now, you're the director of the financial programs in Milford, under the selectmen, which only covers a part of the town.
Correct.
And then you've got to somehow balance school, which by the time you put their health, their bonds is what, 60%, 62%?
At least. Yep.
Right? So 62% of the expenses in Milford don't come under you at all.
Correct.
Parks
Parks,
doesn't come under you.
library,
Library,
yep.
highway.
Highway.
I mean, that's a pretty significant amount of expense that
It is.
somehow you've got to influence.
Yeah.
God, you could be on the FinCom. You could be powerless too.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, realistically, you've got to sell people on the fact that
Yeah.
the most they can spend is X. You can't dictate.
Nope.
And certainly the FinCom, FinCom has no power at all.
Yeah.
They can't dictate to anybody.
No.
Yeah.
Try.
They
but-
try. I mean, you sit there and say, okay, we have $101 million.
How do we divvy it up?
You know, okay, school, you typically get 62%. Okay, police, I mean, look at poor Tom O'Loughlin. What is it, 94, 95% of his budget is salary?
Around there, yeah.
I mean, he's got to be the
correct.
tightest one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He makes it work, though. I mean, they've been fortunate enough where they acquire grants and they've had
Every
some
year,
money brought
you
back.
can count on
know.
two things. Budget time comes, Tom shows up wearing his gun.
Yeah.
It's the only time we see him in the FinCom
Yeah.
with his gun is when it's budget time.
Budget time,
As we keep
yeah.
laughing at TUI Rev 2,
Yeah.
where he said, Bill, you need to bring in like an axe or
I know.
something.
Yeah, you need to be.
Something for props here.
Yeah.
You can't beat Tom's gun.
Yeah. Come in
But-
and spray you guys.
But you know, realistically, if you cut his budget, any significant
You're
amount,
cutting an employee.
you're cutting a dispatcher.
Yeah.
Or you're taking a cop off the street or a fireman off the trucks.
More or less, yeah. Because there's no room to be cutting the general expenses because you pointed it out. It's so tight as it is.
Yeah. But the other thing you can count on is he always leaves about $2.80.
Oh, yeah.
In his
I
budget.
always laugh at that. Yeah.
I mean, the last week of the year, you know he's looking every day.
Yeah, oh, he does.
Every
Yeah.
single day. And the last day, you know, he'll come out and he'll grumble that he left $2.80.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day,
That's good budgeting.
it's great management.
It is. He does very, very good.
You know, because I turn around and say, what more could we ask for from our safety, our fire, our police, than we're getting now.
I'm sure not too much.
You know? I can't think of one thing that I'd say, oh my God, we don't have. But obviously, when either Tom or Bill come before us and they say, I really need, I mean, we just bought a toy worth $1 million.
Trust me, we've been reviewing that for the past 3 months, 2 months.
Just about, yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, we went to the chief. What impressed me the most is he said, look, if I have to, I can live with the one I have for a year. Then we did the math of what it's costing us on maintenance, and it was like, oh, it's actually going to cost us money if we wait another year.
Yeah. And we waited a few years.
Well, we pushed it to the
Yeah.
point, it was like every year. Because, you know, they have those recommendations that the lifetime of a fire truck is 32 days. You should replace your
Yeah.
truck every
Yeah,
month.
exactly.
But, you know, you sit there, it's 15 to 20 years or 10 to 15 years, and the chief pushes it. But then you get to a point where you say, okay, now we're spending more between the price increases and the maintenance.
Yeah. Not to mention the logic of, do we really want a vehicle like this on the road?
Well, but see,
You
that's
know?
always black and white to me. If the chief comes in and says, you're putting my firefighters in danger,
Done.
okay, he's got enough credibility,
Done deal.
you know, we're going to believe him and it's over. The discussion now ends. But if it's, you know, for a couple of years we pushed off because it's 50 grand a year
Yeah.
that it costs us to own that fire truck just in mortgage, you know, if you want to call it a bond or a mortgage or whatever you want, lost revenue, it's 50 grand a year if we get 20 years out of $1 million truck.
Yeah.
So the question is, when does it tip to cost you more than 50 grand a year?
Yeah.
So
Fine balancing act.
how do you approach managing 30% of the budget, but being responsible for 100% of the results?
It's not easy, I'll tell you that much, but I think we've done a great job, and departments and committees and boards all respect us. They view us as experts, as they should, because we are. We don't take our jobs lightly. We put a lot of dedication, and if I'm telling a committee, as I often do, that straight up, this is what we can afford, I know this is what you want, but we simply can't, they typically take my word for it, because our noses are in the books every single day. I mean, we are in the trenches. We know what is going on, and also takes a little bit of persuasion at times, or to put your foot down. I mean, that has to happen too. You can't be a pushover in these positions, because once you are, you end up with an override, and that is not going to happen here.
We don't use profanity at the FinCom.
Yeah.
We don't use it in the studio.
Yeah.
Bad word.
Bad word, you know? So that's just to highlight like how important it is, but to really get back to it, I think people respect what we have to say and respect our roles, and we don't take it lightly, and you have to have those difficult
How
conversations.
do you manage 900 people without an HR director?
We've gotten by for years with it. You know, we have a benefits department, so and that's recent. You remember that when we created the municipal finance department, benefits was always under the treasurer. And my observations watching it was a difficult task to, at the time, was elected too. I mean, we've had some success with elected treasurers in the past, but think about it, you could end up having a popularity contest.
I was going to say,
and
I think we've been a bit lucky.
yes.
Because realistically, you could get somebody who, I mean, we did have somebody running who had no financial experience.
Yeah. And you have to. I mean, ask him. Chris is a very bright man, and I still think there's a degree of a learning curve going on. And if he didn't have he just recently had his master's, congratulate him on that. But it's not easy.
How much money do you manage in investment portfolio?
What do you think we had at the end of this year? Which is a little deceiving, and I'll
So-
tell you why after. But
In a strict investment portfolio, it's probably close to $30 million in the investment.
So,
Sorry.
as an elected
that's just
position,
the investments.
Yeah.
$30 million, you know, you're supposed to guard our little acorns. We
Yep.
give you 30 million of them, and that's what we use for pensions, what we use to pay our bonds, everything.
Pension separate.
That's
Pension,
separate.
we have 60 million.
Well,
And he's
when
the
I say
treasurer of
pensions,
that,
I think
too.
of the health
Separate.
we pay for our
Yeah.
pension,
Yep.
right? Because everybody forgets, teacher retires. Well, they've been paying into the pension and they get paid separately.
Yep.
But wait a minute, we pay their health care.
Yes.
So if you do your job badly and we lose that 30 million,
Yep,
You're in big trouble.
we still have to pay people's health care.
Yep.
that's right.
You know, so I mean, in a way, I worry because the concern was, okay, you're putting too much power under the selectmen, and I'm sitting there saying, really? If you don't like them, fire them.
Yeah.
Every year you get to fire one of them or rehire them,
Yeah.
right?
You're right.
There's 3 selectmen. Every 3 years they're up, so every year there's one.
Yep.
If you don't trust them, let them go.
Yep.
But if you do trust them, I feel a lot more comfortable in having a process where you vet the person and say, okay, how many acorns have you managed in the past?
Yeah.
And how well did you do? You know, how much money did you manage and what were the results?
Yeah. Yeah. The other big seller for me with getting rid of the elected treasurer, and actually we did with the collector too, is just the potential of like a power stance. So when you're elected, you answer to no one but the citizens.
Right.
You don't answer to me, appointed at the time town accountant. You don't even have to listen to me.
So you got
And-
3 years before you could deal with,
Yeah.
oh my God.
Yeah, and not to mention, like, what Chris does, he's got the sole bonding responsibility, but now we look at things together, we analyze things together, and I would think you like that rather
Yeah.
than saying, hey man, go bond $28 million.
Something tells me if I'm managing people's grandmothers'
Yep.
health care and our ability to take care of them, ego aside, I'd want a second set of eyes.
Yep.
Just to say, hey, did I miss something?
Yeah,
And the fact that that second set of eyes is doing your review, even better. That's going to encourage you to ask even more.
correct. So,
What's a typical Wendell day?
Well, it's hard to say what a typical day is, just because.
a typical week, Kate.
Or a
Yeah.
typical week, a
Yeah.
typical period.
All right. Well, the first things, our main responsibilities in a week are, like we've touched on before, the processing of payrolls and also the processing of bills. So all the town departments, they submit payroll, they submit their bills. In our office, we check them. We check the bills. We check for any applicable contracts. We check for, there's a state bid list, which for large purchases, there are recommended vendors that the state recognizes. And that's another check. We look for those for large
That's how we buy our
contracts.
cars, right? We buy it off the, when
Yes.
the chief says, I'm picking a car off the state list, that's what you're referring to.
Correct.
Right, they have a vendor, one of them comes to mind is MHQ, so a lot of the police go there to purchase their vehicles, and that ensures that they're getting what the state determines is the best rate possible for that vehicle. And then, so we check for the contracts, we check for we check for any like ongoing contracts.
All
and
governed by 30B, by the way, procurement law, which in my
Okay,
opinion,
30B,
Chapter 30B, which procurement law, which makes it mandatory for quoting, bidding requirements, certain
30B is
thresholds.
the state regulations for purchasing.
You got it.
Yep.
You know, that's where they set down, I mean, you can't just call Chris's cousin.
That's
And
why
say-
30B exists. Yeah. But on that point, glad you said that. Like the concept of it, I'm sure that happened 60s, 70s, probably earlier, like crazy, and these regulations came into place to prevent that. But now it's almost at another extreme where you can't do anything without going through these proper channels, and sometimes it becomes real difficult for us because you might have one of those elected employees that's not really caught up to par with what you have to do. They make a purchase that should have required 3 additional written quotes submitted to Wendell for his review. He reviews it. There's only one. Calls him up. Hey, what's going on here? Oh, that was the perfect piece of equipment. I wanted it. I bought it. Okay, well, it's our responsibility to tell you I'm not paying for this. Now you penalize the vendor. You tell the department head, hey, you're going to have to pay this out of your own pocket. I mean, we try to do what we can, but that's the
But the most
concept of
important
what you're
thing is
supposed
now
to
you're
do.
educating the town officials saying,
It is.
here are the rules.
Yeah, we try to update
Right.
them on an annual basis.
You know, you can then
sometimes
evaluate it and say, in retrospect, they did the right thing.
Yeah.
They
Exactly,
didn't
yeah.
follow the exact procedure, but the town ended up in the right spot.
Yes. But audit doesn't see it that way.
No.
You know?
No, and rightfully so, if Chris screwed up one time, and then Wendell said bad, and the next time he followed, okay. I
Yeah.
mean, everybody's allowed to not be perfect, you know, unless there's a big red S on your chest,
Yeah.
and you can fly
Yeah.
through the air, you're not gonna be super person. But if Chris does it 2 times,
When
3
they
times,
ignore us, our powers, our responsibilities, get upset, you gotta put your foot down and you have to make an example, and we've done it.
Yeah.
It's
And I mean,
not easy.
realistically,
People
now-
get mad at you and hold grudges in this town
since
forever.
he's not,
You know?
since he's not an elected official, he reports to somebody.
Yes.
So, you know, you can go to so-and-so's boss and say, hey, look, we tried once. Second time, it can't be a third. I mean, that's cause,
Yeah.
if you're flouting the law. So, back to, you check the contracts.
Yep, and I was also it was when we have large ongoing contracts, for example, some of the building that's going on during the youth center, we always have the contract total. We put together an Excel spreadsheet where we track each payment. So at the end, we say,
Recap
you know,
sheet.
we know what's remaining on the contract balance, and we make sure we don't overpay, and we can project what our expenses are, our ongoing liability is for, you know, contracts
Goes
we're
into
on the
play
hook
with
for.
him, with his cash flow, what are we expecting, position
How much
the
do I have
money
to bond?
properly.
Yep.
Yep, at times,
Because, I mean, if you
yes.
think about it, one of the problems we had back late 80s in Milford is some of the banks that are no longer here weren't checking. And all of a sudden, they're writing checks because houses are complete, and they weren't started. And then the developer runs out of money,
Yep.
and you have roads that weren't bonded and houses that are half-built. Now what do you do?
No cash, not much, right?
You're stuck.
Yeah.
So having you make sure that if I got an article for $100, I'm only going to spend $100.
$100, yeah. And you'd be surprised, it comes up more often than you would think, that even maybe with a vendor that will submit something, he reviews it, and it's not what was originally contracted. So then we gotta get on the phone, usually start with the department head for the courtesy, what's going on here? You submitted this, you told us 3 months ago it was a $10,000 purchase.
Yeah,
and
brown
now it's
minivan.
12.
What is this Lamborghini that's
Yeah, you know, so it does happen. That's a lot of our day-to-day activity. Not to cut you off, but that's AP payroll. That's a lot of what we have to do. We have weekly warrants every single week. We have these. These guys hear me talk a lot about priorities. These right now are our priorities. We have weekly priorities, monthly priorities, annual priorities. And we're about to jump into one of our annual. We're going to start the budget process all over again. We're halfway through the year. Let's gear up. We're going
How
to
do
do it
we
again.
pay? I mean, at my company, I tell my vendors, we agree to net 30. We will pay you either 31 or 42 days, because we only have 2 check runs a month. So if your bill comes in and the check run is tomorrow, boy, you're going to get it on the 31st day, we cut a
Yep.
check. But if your bill comes in day after a check run, well, it's 10 working days
10
till the
more.
next one.
Yep.
So somewhere between 31 and 42 days is when we're going to pay you. And then the exceptions I make is when we have contractors, because that's their payroll.
Yeah.
You know, when these consultants come in, we pay them within 2 weeks, because that's their paycheck. What does the town pay?
Well, a lot of that has to do with the departments themselves, because they're the first ones to get the actual invoices. So, you know, we ultimately do our best to process it on a timely manner, but we're dependent on them giving us the invoice in a timely manner. And then from there, we process it and we pay, like every Wednesday, we cut checks. So, you know, if you say, typically, someone would submit bills either for the week, they're due by Wednesday at 12 o'clock, and then the check would be cut on the following Wednesday.
In a week?
Yep.
Yes.
Every
So when Wendell's office is looking for all the compliance stuff, my office is getting all the checks ready, making sure all the vendors or addresses are up to date. If they're a 1099 vendor, their
Right.
tax IDs are in the system. everything that's going to help us towards the end
They
of the
must
year.
love
So-
you.
So we, once
No,
we,
seriously, I don't know of any.
Again, depending
Customer.
on when the department had given
Yeah, but
to
wait a minute,
us, you know?
that's a different animal.
That's a different
Because
animal.
I also tell my AP, the clock starts the day an approved invoice is processed.
Yeah,
If one of my department heads sat on it for 2-3 weeks, well, then he'll
how
have
do you
to, or
know
she,
that? Yeah, exactly.
they'll have to explain to their vendor.
Yep.
Because we'll have a vendor call and say,
Yeah.
it's been 52 days. And we look and we say, no, it's only been 27 since we
Yeah.
got it. Well, I sent it.
Yep,
Or we had the real cute thing where vendors were predating.
yep.
When I first joined, I said, wait a minute, how did that get in? Well, that was dated 3 weeks ago. I said, no, it just arrived today. I don't care what date
Yeah,
they put on it.
exactly.
Today is the day the clock starts.
Yep, you didn't send it.
And we pay 30 to 42 days from today.
That's
Except
where stamping comes in handy.
it's
Received
the
it
old
home.
analog, procedure,
Yep.
put a stamp on it, and you look and you say, no, it hit this office
Yeah,
on this day. It also kept people from just telling a vendor, go ahead, do it, and not letting us know.
exactly.
There's no purchase rec. It's not in the system. It's gonna slow it down. But I've never heard of somebody paying net 7. That's amazing.
we have a check run every week. Doesn't necessarily mean the invoice is 7 days old. The invoice could
okay.
be 2
Yeah.
months old. It's
Yeah.
based off of when the department wants to submit it to the accountant's treasurer's office to get ready. But we're averaging, usually on a weekly basis, we're probably about 150 checks a week. Upwards sometimes. A
Every
couple
week.
weeks ago, we had
Just
500
AP.
checks. So that's just AP, and we cut them on a Friday. We have until the selectmen sign the warrants over the weekend. We have Monday or Tuesday to mail them out, because they're dated the following Wednesday.
And until
So-
those are signed, they don't go out.
So we
Yeah,
do,
yeah.
I mean, as, one office is checking everything, the other one's preparing everything.
Who signs the checks?
I sign the checks.
So the selectmen have to sign the approval,
The
Yep.
warrant,
And
yep,
the warrant, which most people would say is the approval.
yes.
Yep.
Because we say warrant and people look at us like,
Going to jail?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What sheriff, subpoena? No, it's not that kind of warrant. It's an approval.
Yes, exactly. So sometimes where it becomes challenging, as you mentioned earlier on, when you have these other committees and boards, so someone like the school committee, they have to have principals, whatnot. They use a purchase order system. Us on our side, we don't. But it's necessary for them because it has to go through certain channels of command.
Sure.
So they'll put in a purchase order, hey, I want to buy a bunch of pencils. They'll go through up to the proper person, go ahead and do it. They buy it, they get the invoice, they send it, earmark it based on that purchase order back up to the proper person to put it together, in which they then have to wait for a school committee. Now, school committee goes and authorizes them, signs off on them. At that point, they come back to the original cycle of what we just talked about. It comes down to Wendell. He does his review, and some of the things you didn't touch on with not only just the procurement and making sure proper fiscal years, making sure that there's no tax. We don't pay any tax, no tax there, and making sure it's within appropriation.
Well, I remember.
You know, so looking
we
at
were
the
at a little
budgets.
company called Waters. I had a little account called NIH, the National Institutes of Health down in Bethesda. They paid 90 days. It was very simple. It was 85 to 95 days, you got your check. And a brand new Wendell came in and wanted to put them on credit hold. We almost laughed. Said, now, here's the institute that pays out 85% of all fundamental biological research in the United States. And you think they're going to change
Yeah. Not
for
gonna
us? Not going to happen.
Right.
And there was this whole thing, well, it's not fair. Well, it's government. They basically, just like I tell my vendors, if you want to do business with me, 31 to 42 days.
Yep.
Don't bug me before that. If it's 40 days out, I don't want to hear.
Yeah, it's coming. Don't worry.
That's the price of doing business with my company to make it easier for us. And you can't change it.
No.
That's why I was curious as to, in general, how long does it take a vendor to get money from the town? But it seems like if I want to take care of my vendors and I do the signatures and run it through
Quickly.
very quickly,
Yes.
which is a good thing because they'll like to work with you.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else takes up a window week?
What else? Let's see. So then after the payroll and AP are complete, Chris's office, they finalize it, they print the checks, and we prepare a report for the selectmen, and there's 2 forms we submit to them every week. One report's based on the deficits, and what that is it looks at different articles, different like revolving funds that may be out there, and some of these funds are based on state laws. You can have deficits in them, and we just report this to the selectmen. If there are any unauthorized ones, we look into it. Was it charged to the wrong account, or see the reasoning behind it? And so that's one of the reports. Another report I create is it has a recap of all the large contract payments, any state bid items that were on there for the week. It recaps the total that was spent in payroll, and if there are any unique payroll circumstances or something like that, we note that on that, and it's just to report.
If we don't use a purchase order system at Town Hall, how does a vendor get a PO?
If a vendor needs a purchase order, I mean, we have purchase orders.
But I mean, how does a vendor get authorized to do work or supply product to the town?
Through the bidding process.
Okay, so essentially,
It's somewhat, yeah.
it's not that,
It's just on the school
Chris-
side, everything. That's why I use the example
Yeah.
of a pencil.
but Chris
you
just
know?
can't call up and say, hey, look, I'd like a new television in my office, send it to me.
He could. He's got a budget. He's the department head responsible for it. Would he do that? No. But he
Well, in a
could.
way, though, you
and
have
then
a-
that's where it becomes on us. We've denied stuff. We absolutely have denied items. Most of the time it's food, where I'm like, you can't do this, deny. You got to pay it yourself, But we absolutely have.
But you do have the check and balance, because you as a department head, if I understand right, at the end of the year, by law, you have to balance your budget.
Yeah. Yeah, you have a deficit. I don't think it's ever been exercised to this extreme unless it's an extreme situation. But you could serve time. You can have
No, but
penalties.
no matter what,
$25,000.
It would be up to you. If you're $1,000 short because you bought food that snuck through, the town, not that it would have to do it, but they could say, hey,
That's right.
it's
Well,
it's on
and
you.
At that point, he shouldn't have allowed that to
Well,
go
yeah,
down.
yeah,
to
that's
$1,000.
just
what I was- this is
Window
what I
gets
was gonna get.
Window gets a DiNozzo on the hand.
Yeah.
He gets a slap saying
Yeah.
bad window. You let
Yeah.
it sneak through, but
Powers of the town accountant states that you have to look for amounts in excessive nature, something like that, in excess. But what it's referring to is not meaning like you seriously paid $2,000 for that binder. It
Right.
means in excess of your appropriation that you were given. So not so much of a concern early on in the budget season, but once at this point on, every single week we are looking at those budgets, those line items to make sure they're lining up.
Yeah.
Unless you
Well-
see something crazy in the beginning
But
of
then
the
you
year.
also put together that Article N-1 and N-2, the last 2 articles. One of them is,
Oh, the
okay.
transfers.
The transfers.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so,
So at that point, it seems like we probably allowed it to, but we didn't. We will not pay that bill, so it's sitting there outstanding until there's a solution. If there's no solution, the last resort, hey, you got to sponsor an article, go to town meeting,
And
you get a
explain.
prior year bill paid at 9/10 vote.
yeah, we've gone through a couple times where department heads have come to us. Highway department years ago, they had a catastrophic failure, I think, of a heater. And we said, well, try and absorb it. If you can't, come talk to us at the end of the year and we'll use the FinCom emergency fund.
Correct.
And then all of a sudden they had a problem with the roof. And they came back and the highway surveyor said, look, I put off hiring. So I've got money in my salary account.
Yeah.
So I've got enough money in my budget. But years ago, the town meeting put some controls saying you can't indiscriminately just move money
Correct.
from people to stuff and stuff to people.
Yes.
So that's where you come in with that article, the last or the second last article for
Yep.
transfers to say,
So we do the 2 waves. We have one with town meeting can as the legislative body can kind of do whatever they want there. So we present that and they can move it around. But secondly, also under Chapter 44, Section 33B, you're allowed to, the selectmen with the concurrence of the FinCom can make certain threshold transfers. So if someone goes over $2, come on, let's just square up here, you know? But something large, it may not be eligible.
Well, no,
for
when
that
we go
33B.
through that, the intent is, at least what I've seen at the FinCom level, the intent is really more important.
Yes.
You know, if you did something and you're $100 over on a $200,000 budget, you know.
Yeah.
Or if you came and told us, hey guys, this is the right thing to do. I need to buy this heater. I don't want the highway people turning into highway sickles.
Yeah.
Right? And at the
give
end of
me
the
some
year,
support.
you're 500 or whatever, $1,000 short, but you've already told us. Well, the intent was right. You came, you told us,
Yeah. Yep.
and we said we'd cover you. On the other hand, if you just went out and
expect it.
not
Yeah.
not a good thing.
No, it's not. Yeah.
So what do you think are the biggest challenges we have coming?
Water company. That's going to be a big boy. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more about that in future meetings. For now, we can't talk too much, but that's going to be a big boy. That's going to need a good amount of attention. The annual budget every year is really important to me. Keeping that in check is what keeps us healthy. Once you let that go nilly-willy, then there's not much you can do as far as capital and other items. I thought we've done an excellent job over the years with pushing capital into October for that very reason. And we've done a lot of work with capital in the past 3 months and really heavily over the past few weeks. And I think we're again going to see a really successful year of keeping that out of the annual budget, or the annual town meeting, I should say, and moving off into October. That way we can really see what's going on.
Well, people have sort of accepted this unofficial policy,
Yeah.
because there's no real policy. But we've said in May, unless it's an emergency,
Yep.
like last year, Tom O'Laughlin came and said, I have 90 days. If I put up 20%, I'll get a grant from National Grid for 80. It's work we were budgeting for anyway. Okay.
Makes sense to me.
To me, that's emergency.
Yeah.
You know, or if there's really a safety issue. You know, we've had things where pavement lifted up and we needed 10 grand because some of our elderly,
Can't wait at that point, or you're gonna.
I'm gonna have grandma
be-
tripping
You're gonna be
over.
paying it out of a liability account. Remember,
not
we're
only that.
self-insured. Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna look at somebody and say,
can't,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, Wendell, your grandmother fell down because we wanted to stick to the rule
Yeah.
of 3 months. So that makes sense.
It does.
You know, we've been very, very good at saying, okay, special or emergency. So you got a grant that's critical on it, or we have this, but most of it waits till the fall.
Yes. And we're gonna see that again this year. We're very confident with that. And it's the right thing to do for many reasons. As you know, once 6/30 comes and goes, which is any municipality's actual year end, free cash goes. Even if we're sitting on some money, it's gone until
You
I
know,
get
and
down to it and start.
That's always a
redoing
word
it.
that I wish people had coined a different phrase.
I like to call it recycled cash.
Well, but no matter what, you know, free cash, not free, came out of my pocket.
Yeah, exactly.
But it really is the surplus money that wasn't spent.
Yeah, it's uncommitted unassigned.
Uncommitted, but it's money we didn't spend.
It's money we didn't spend.
And you know, when people look and say, how can you have $2 million?
And more money than we budgeted on revenue.
Well, but I mean, even if the revenue was dead on, we hope to have a couple $1 million every year in free cash. I mean, that's 98% efficiency.
Yes.
I don't know that, I know I wouldn't want to budget any tighter
Yeah. Then
than 98%.
I agree.
And it's hard for people to think 2% is $2 million.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
We're a $100 million budget.
Yeah.
So when the school budgets and comes within 2%, okay, but that's $60 billion, right? There's $1 million left on the, that's great news.
Yeah,
Because one of these days, we're going to not have it.
correct.
And, you know, better that we have a little extra here
Yeah.
and there.
Hasn't happened under my reign, but I've reviewed past town meetings and past balance sheets, free cash. It's happened here.
We were in times when it was negative free cash.
Yeah.
Or the Romney years where we came back in mid-year, got a big slash in budget.
Yep.
You know, what do you do?
Gets raised on the tax recap and hurts you again. When that
Well,
happens, it hurts you twice.
So from that end, you know, when people say, how can you have $2 million a year? I'm like, this is great. Especially if we're putting half of it or more back.
Yep.
Because again, it's not our money.
Yep.
You know, I've always laughed and said, you know, if I want to go ridiculous and spend my $2.50 on my cup of coffee, I worked for it. It's mine. I can spend it.
There you go.
Before I spend your mother's $2.50, I better be thinking 3 times.
Yeah.
You know, not
Gotcha.
just once.
I got you.
Because it's not our money.
Another, you asked me what big ticket items or what should we be concerned about. I think what's going to be really showing its head soon is going to be this stormwater, this whole stormwater thing. You know, so you know we've appropriated money over the past 5 years, maybe even longer than that. Yes, fingernail size.
We've appropriated not even the tail of the dog,
It's
the
gonna-
tip of the tail.
It's gonna start tearing up. It's gonna, unless we know Trump's stance on the EPA, but I still think it's gonna be
There's
here.
2 things that, you know, if I have to look at what could keep me up at night, one is that, the other is OPEB.
Yes.
Because when you start looking, saying, okay, when people retire, you know, they've put into their pension, that's easy to forecast. You make $100 a year, you retire at 70%, at $70 a year, and maybe coal on top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ta-da! But people forget,
We promised you a health
Medical.
insurance. Yeah.
we promised you medical, and that is not going up at 2% a year.
No, it's not.
So that whole other post-employment benefits thing,
Got it. Yep.
the insurances, that really worries me.
Yeah.
Because it's just not sustainable.
It's big time dollars. It's currently not mandated to be funded, which thank goodness it's not, because a town like us, yeah, maybe we could do it, but we'd be at our limit. Other towns already at the limit. There's no way. There is no way. So I'm not the biggest fan of OPEB. You've heard me preach about that a lot, just because I think that factor is ridiculous, but nonetheless, it's a reality.
But you've got states now looking, saying, we cannot physically meet.
Can't.
There's not enough money. And you can't go raising taxes 10, 20%.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, there'd be a mutiny.
As can the assumptions are also ridiculous that they use.
We just had our actual audit for OPEB that they come in, they look at the past years, and they look at the death rate table, they look at the mortality tables, they look at how the investments are going, and they give you pretty much almost like a funding schedule with a rate associated to it. And the rates, you know, it used to be 7.5, now we're down to 4.5.
It always seems like they find a way to say, all right, well, nothing changed, but
Yeah.
your liability went up.
So,
Okay, how did that happen?
So in 2015, we were at a 7.5% rate that they were using. Our liability was 64 million. Well, this year we came in, they had to, due to these new general accounting standards that are coming out, they have to bring it down to 4.5 because that's the max. Well, brings our liability up to 84 million. So,
With nothing changing.
With nothing changing. So, we're fortunate enough that we have it built into our budget that we put 600,000 away a year, which by no means 600,000 on 84 million that's going to continue to
touch
grow doesn't touch it. But we're being proactive on that.
But at least the water's not getting, I mean,
Yeah.
Right, we're
for
trying.
us, the water's yay high.
He's
We're
got a
trying
really
to-
cool stat. Our investment firm is Bartholomew. They're one of the largest, and they handle our OPEB. And you can tell them the
So-
stat that they told us, which I thought was pretty cool.
So they manage probably about 260 towns
Out of 300.
out of the
odd.
365.
Most of them.
For the most part. So their specific OPEB funds that they manage is about 100 million, give or take a million. We're currently at 3.6 in our OPEB fund. That's not market value, that's true value. And that's 3% of what they manage. So a town our size is 3%
Of the entire
of that. you
Of
know.
2/3 of the state.
Correct. So you're looking, you got to think your bigger ones are Boston and Cambridge that are making up that larger chunk, but their budget's probably 9-10 times the size of ours.
Well, I
maybe
know
even-
it's blasphemy, but industry, many decades ago, stopped doing pensions. They just said, can't do it. We're going to give you a 401k, we're going to give you X dollars, you're on your own.
Yep.
I think eventually, municipalities are going to have to deal with it because there's just not enough money.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, there needs to be serious pension reform, and they've just been held powerless. They try, and a lot of...
Well, you'll run into things like some of the states out in the square states where they're just saying, the Chris Pillars of the world are saying, I got $100. That's what I got.
Yeah,
You want me to spend 200?
can't
Okay.
do it. Yep,
Yeah.
I need the extra $100. Whether
right.
you raise taxes, whatever you do,
gotta do it.
you got to do it because
Yeah.
I cannot continue
Yeah.
to pay. You know, eventually you hit the wall.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, I'm sure you've heard this quite often too with citizens while you're out and about. But why are we putting into stabilization? Why? We're over $20 million. So I always like to say, well, how about those pier of liabilities we have called OPEB in the pension? That's, what, 6 times the size of that?
It's not even that. I mean, more than a dozen years ago, when Uncle Phil and crew set up the stabilization account, and we kept funding it, and people kept saying, why are you putting money in there? And a few of us looked and said, there's a school coming.
Yep.
And when Woodland came, it made me feel very good. Neighboring town did a school, and now you get your increase. And they say, oh, by the way, I need another
To
$500
pay for the
a
school.
year just for that one school for the next 20 years. You know, so it's the same thing now when we had the surplus. And everybody said, why didn't you give it all back? Why did you put more into stabilization? And I looked and said, there's a school coming.
Yeah.
In 10 years, we're going to have to renovate Milford High. I mean, I was the first class out of there, 74. We haven't really done anything to it,
Yeah.
right? So there's a school coming, and I certainly hope, I don't know if I'll be around for it, but when the FinCom in 10 or 12 years deals with it, that they can reach back and do what you did
Yeah.
and say, okay, if we squeeze for 2 or 3 years,
We'll be
we can
good
do
for
this
the
out of
next
proceeds.
20. Yep.
It's kind of go along with that. Zach probably can vouch for me with that, but kind of what I kind of preach to him is put money into savings and reduce your debt. And, you know, I feel like we have a good plan on that, but every time we come around to this budget season, he'll get the, you know, hey, Zach, what can we do to lower this debt? Because
Well, I mean, we came to you and said, okay, what bonds do we have that are callable without no penalties?
that's right.
Yeah.
You know,
But that to me is a good way to spend free cash.
It is.
Right.
Definitely.
We're taking down the debt that my kids are going to have to deal with,
Yeah.
and your kids.
that's right.
That's one thing we try to keep in our mind is try not to keep it just the taxpayers of today. Spread it out.
Well, the people who built Milford made some good decisions,
They did.
and we're benefiting from that. So us following their example makes me feel good.
Absolutely.
And we're not doing anything special. It's just what we should do, what we have to do for our kids.
Makes me feel proud to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you.
Thank you.
As always, I hope that this has given you some insight. It seems like our finances just roll along, but you've seen 3 people who were instrumental in somehow making it happen. So to our 6 loyal viewers, God bless. May tomorrow be a better day than today, and stay tuned because we got a town meeting coming and we got a water company and all sorts of good stuff to talk about. Good night, all.
Not too long since I've been